as a valuable, non-renewable resource. Any nation's ability to survive and prosper depends heavily on its supply of oil. The majority of oil-poor nations are currently desperately accumulating oil in preparation for difficulty down the road, being a developed nation with 1.4 billion people. In order to increase its oil import routes, China, which is still in the stage of continuous development, has a very high need for oil. The biggest offshore oil port in the world took 14 years to construct in China. It not only secures the security of the Chinese oil supply, but also lifts the American shipping embargo on China. So what does this port mean strategically for China? How does it end the oil embargo imposed by the US on China? Pakistan's Gwadar city is home to water ports. It is presently Pakistan's third largest port and one of the most significant ports China has constructed abroad. But many years ago, it was simply a little, barely noticeable fishing community, and you might not even be able to locate its name on a map. Before we start, subscribe to Chin News to watch about all the secret projects, one of the first. So let's begin, however, due to its significant location in the Persian Gulf. Gwadar port has a very high strategic significance for China. China had intended to use the Gwadar port to swiftly transfer ships and products to the Middle East and the Persian Gulf, and the port can accommodate tankers of 80,000 to 100,000 tons. China and Pakistan agreed to cooperate in 2002, and the two would now work together to develop the important port. Gwadar port was formally available for passage up to November 2016. It is a Chinese-funded port, and both the money and the technology are Chinese. As one of the key projects of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, the Gwadar port's business is currently continually expanding, and its supporting projects are also becoming better by the day. Along with providing Pakistan with new chances for growth, Gwadar port also lifts an American blockade and creates a new route for the transfer of Chinese energy. You say that, why? As is well known, China is a major producer of goods and is known as the world's factory. However, China's energy supplies are relatively limited, particularly its oil supplies. As a result, after the crude oil China purchases is sent from the Persian Gulf, China imports 400 million tons of crude oil annually, the majority of which comes from the Middle East, particularly those close to the Persian Gulf. It must travel by cruise ship around the Indian Peninsula, then via the Strait of Malacca adjacent to Singapore to traverse the Indian Ocean, and lastly, it must travel more than halfway around the globe to reach China. Thus, once there is a disruption in the global pattern, the hazards on the road will inevitably rise in addition to the high freight. Energy security won't be assured, and the shipping of China's crude oil is likely to be hampered. Additionally, the Persian Gulf is inside the United States' sphere of influence, and the country has long kept a close eye on the region. In order to avoid the risk of an interest conflict with the United States on the traditional transit route, China must transfer oil outside of the Persian Gulf. An important entrance is the Strait of Malacca. The Philippines and Singapore both have naval sites that the United States constantly monitors in an effort to upset the global order. China will suffer a terrible catastrophe if there is an issue with its vital oil line. But when it comes to this, the Chinese are quite wise. They consciously decide to develop a port in Pakistan. From the Middle East, they may travel hundreds of kilometers to the Gwadar port and then use the oil pipeline to traverse into Pakistan. China's oil can reduce the sea distance on land by 85. Distance reduction not only lowers expenses, but also directly ensures the security of crude oil transportation. Releasing the United States and the Strait of Malacca from authority, the route for conventional transportation was originally 12,000 kilometers long, but it is presently just 2,395 kilometers long. Additionally, the travel distance between Europe, Xinjiang, and China is 7,000 kilometers, which is 5,000 kilometers shorter than the initial trip. And the price is much down. Oil is transported through pipelines at a low cost and in a very safe manner. Due to China's prowess in building, the development of the Gwadar port is obviously crucial for China. The entire port city is typically built out over the course of 5 or 6 years. Why did the construction of the Gwadar port take 14 years? In point of fact, the development time for the Gwadar port might be limited as early as the year 27 due to political concerns as well as technological constraints. China was able to complete the construction of the primary structure of the Gwadar port in just 5 years after it had begun. However, in order to handle China's new energy transit route over the Strait of Malacca, Singapore has paid a significant amount of money to lease Gwadar port for more than 40 years. This transaction took place in 2014. It is their intention to keep this region idle until the year 2012, so postponing the beginning of construction on China's Gwadar port. In Pakistan's marine industry, the building of the Gwadar port was given an additional 5 years of time. The revolting Pakistani government came to the conclusion that the best way to restore control of the port's operations was to hand over management of the facility to a Chinese company. It was not until 2015 that China legally acquired the land use rights for the 2281-acre portion of the Pakistani port of Gwadar, which had a lease length of 43 years. It was feasible to proceed with construction while simultaneously utilizing the Gwadar port. In addition to this, a water port is not the same as a regular port since it serves as a key hub for public engineering. It is located some distance away from the center of the economic activity, and neither the transportation infrastructure nor the economic center are in place to support it, because the goal that the Chinese actually want to achieve is to transform this modest fishing hamlet into a new megaport city. They will need to invest a great deal of labor and material resources in the project, in addition to a great deal of commercial facilities after it is built. As a direct consequence of this project has always been an integral component of China's all-encompassing development system, and it also entails a considerable amount of project work. Since September 2018, more than 20 enterprises have established themselves within the park, and the majority of these establishments have reached their final stages of completion. The once tiny fishing hamlet has slowly gotten richer, and new cities with larger populations are continuously emerging nearby. There has been an avalanche of progress made in terms of the quality of life, and the expansion of the port has been of tremendous assistance to the neighborhood as a whole. Additionally, Chinese companies have installed seawater desalination equipment on the Gwadar port, which has the ability to treat 5.5 million gallons of water each and every day. It is possible that this will help the people by not just satisfying the day-to-day production and habitation demands of the port, but also by providing free, uncontaminated water to the towns that are nearby. China has also made investments in the construction of hospitals and schools, which have resulted in an increase in the standard of living of the people and have earned universal praise. A future date? This new port city will see more development, as well as the completion of a modern park that is now under construction. After breaking free from the constraints of the Persian Gulf and where the United States is located, China spent the next 14 years developing a marine port that not only made the treacherous Strait of Malacca unnecessary, but also decreased the amount of money that China spent on transportation. In addition to this, it created a pathway for commercial exchange with the growing oil states of Africa. From this point of view, we are conscious of the significance that the Gwadar port holds for China. Click on these videos to watch about other amazing projects.